Hello, everybody. So I am actually stepping in for a very formidable colleague of mine, an extremely graceful lady, Rakhi Lalwani. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it. I wasn't sure if I could make it, but then I was petrified. And he says that women are difficult to handle. I think he's been very difficult to handle. So here I am, and I hope I can do justice to this panel. There are these absolutely very well accomplished ladies over here who are going to give us very different perspectives of what it is about women in hospitality. And typically one would start with saying that, is there a gender bias? Is there not a gender bias? I'm just going to make this absolutely sweeping statement, which is factually correct. There is a gender bias. I mean, if there wasn't a gender bias, then we would have panels saying men in hospitality. And, some of you guys would be sitting over here and doing that, and not us women in hospitality. But let me also say on a lighter note that when Bhuvnesh said that, there is a panel that you have to do, he's very smart. He didn't tell me what is the subject. He just said, you're substituting for Rakhi because she's not well. Don't ask me what's the topic. Because had he told me the topic, I would have said, no, I'm not doing it. I'm done with this. Because we keep talking about it and we keep saying that there are these biases. But, like you guys said, 30 years, we're still being discussing the same subject. So either the needle is not moving or it's moving really slow for it to make any meaningful impact. So I'm going to jump right into it, and I'm going to ask Ritika this. There is a basic thing that, there are these male stereotype attitude traits that happen. So, there are these male stereotypes that are there. These are attitude traits that are there. You need to be aggressive. You need to be confident. You need to be brutal. You need to, be able to make sharp decisions. You cannot be empathetic. And I'm using these words because you guys would be cringing and saying, of course you can be, because that's what leadership is all about. But in reality, these are traits which are there. And what I'm going to say about it is that these are these maladaptations that women in the workforce, not just hospitality, but just women in the workforce actually start adapting to it. So they're maladaptations because we totally shouldn't. Have you experienced any such traits that you felt were nothing to do with your performance, nothing to do with the job at hand, but if you didn't demonstrate some of these traits, you wouldn't fit in?
So we discussed this already, and I have to be very candid. 3 of my bosses are sitting in the room over here right now. And I personally have never really faced that. And that's just the truth of the way, at least my experience has been. And I also feel part of it is because, in our organization, that's the only company I worked in, IHCL, diversity in a way is actually enshrined in what we do. There is obviously a lot of diverse thoughts. Do biases exist? Of course they do. Is there debate around that? Do you go back and say your point of view, and are you heard for it? I think so. For me personally, I work with some very strong lady bosses, and you know them as well. Camellia Punjabi, Renu Basu, Jyoti Narang, Deepa Harris, Suma Venkatesh. So I think, for me personally, it's been a journey where I have learned whatever I have from everyone around me. It didn't matter whether it was a male or a female. It didn't matter whether it was somebody in the field that I was in sales and marketing or in operations, because I think that hotels in that sense are really a microcosm of the life around us. When I joined, of course, the world was very different. So I would be lying if I said that if I went to a customer's office and people were not biased about us. They didn't know why we were coming to meet up with them. Some, of course, also said some very unsavory comments. But I think, when you work in a company where what you say and what you think, you can go back and freely exchange with each other. Personally, I haven't really found that, Anshu. So that's my answer.
Great, but I think one of the major things that's coming out is that if you yourself have a gender agnostic way of thinking, then you possibly overcome these biases or you do not realize it, and therefore that gets you to move forward. Which also gets me to the next thing, that actually speaking, performance should be the best equalizer, right? Because if you have clearly performed, everything else basically just fades away. And yet there is something called as fitting in or not fitting in. And I'm going to give you a little 1 second anecdote about what I have faced. So, and some of you would laugh over here, especially sitting on the front table right in front of me. I used to be told that I mean, I'm not as graceful as these ladies. I don't drape a sari too well. I'm very clunky with it. So I used to wear a regular business suit. And I was told that you cannot wear beige and lavender. And lavender is not purple, lavender is really, really light shade. And I was told, no, you can't wear it. If you're wearing a suit, you have to wear black, blue, pinstripe, gray. And I'm not going for my funeral. So I said, why? And the funny bit was that I could wear a sari with rainbow colors. But if I'm wearing a business suit, it had to be these colors. And I could never understand why. I never changed. And which got me to the point then when there was something that was coming up, I was told I don't fit in. And to you, Anjali, have you ever faced this situation where performance is not the equalizer and you've been told, oh, you don't fit in?
So yes, I think it was about, things are very different now, but 30 years ago, 30 plus years ago, when I started off in the industry, and I like to say my blood group is H positive. I only have no hospitality. That's the only industry I've ever worked in. I wanted to be a pilot. I couldn't. So I did the next best thing, marry a pilot and work for an airline. So when I started off in the early stages of my career, and I was working for an airline, and our airline got sold out to another company. The first thing was that what do you do with the leadership team? Do they stay or do they go? And we had 56 stations with 55 male heads, and I was the only one that was a female. And I was told that I would not be given that position because I was a woman, whereas all my other 55 counterparts were given the station manager's position. So I was put on a 6-month probation, and I had to prove myself for 6 months and then have my performance speak for itself. So I faced gender bias at very early stage of my career.
Wow, you were actually told on your face.
Yes, blatantly told on my face. And I took this as a challenge, and I said, I'm going to prove that wrong.
Wow, that's outstanding. You know, that's really unfortunate. But at another level, I think it's also fortunate that it is in your face that you were able to face it, you know, because a lot of us sometimes suffer from the fact that we're not told. We're just grappling with it, that what did I do wrong?
And I agree with you, Anshu. I think, you know, that transparency, yes, I was not being given something because I was a woman. I was willing to take that and say, okay, I will prove myself and let my work speak. I think now when I look back, there was huge amount of learning from that experience for me. How I went above and beyond and did things that I probably would not have pushed myself to do. But it gave me that confidence that I can do it. And it's not that because I'm a woman, I can't do this. So I think I had that, it gave me that extra drive. And I think today, things are extremely different. I mean, you look at our leaders today, I've been blessed to work with some of the best companies, have the best chief operating officers and CEOs from Anurag to Dilip, who believe in the power of balanced leadership and what that balanced leadership actually does to your bottom line. And today, I think we as women in a certain position have that ability to nurture talent, to mentor talent right from the grassroots, so that people, what we have faced, the future generations don't have to face. I think things have changed a lot. But 30 years down the line, if we're still discussing whether there is bias that exists or not, like you rightly said, I think there still exists. Only the amount probably varies.
Yeah, probably the quantum varies. Probably we've gotten used to it. But yeah, it definitely exists. There is another thing to it. You know, before we look out and we actually start looking at all the men in the room and saying, oh my God, you guys are biasing us. the reality of it is, I'm not too sure how many times women actually step up and appreciate other women. I'm not too sure if we actually look at it differently and say that, listen, I am going to take a step forward and be able to help you overcome these biases, some of these subtle biases that exist in the industry and that we've gone through. Mridula, how do you see that? You come from a different background, and I think there is one part of it which is to do with the workplace. The women, I mean, all of us actually go back to our homes. There's a cultural thing which is also existing that cannot be excluded out of this scenario. What are your views on it?
Yeah, so just to give context to everybody else on the panel and how I would differentiate, what we are talking about is modern Indian women in metro cities and the challenges they're facing. The beauty, I mean, we celebrate it. The beauty is that we exist in the small towns and the villages of India, and the brand CGH Earth, currently in southern India, particularly in Kerala, our success stories have been to integrate the community into our workforce. Now, we have different challenges, and as I mentioned, it's the cultural context, which becomes very tough I mean, now I can also speak from the ownership side as well, where the challenges that we have and to manage it, their families, their parents, and they're apprehensive of sending their girls into the workforce. They see, I mean, today, of course, tourism has become a big industry in Kerala, but when we started off, hotel business is not the space for women, and they don't know what's happening there. So we had to break all these and show to them that, listen, your women can rise up. And so before I talk about a personal experience, I want to emphasize that when we look at hiring, we were looking at, and this is way before I also joined the company. So this is a story of when my parents, I mean, my dad, and when they were trying to hire, we are located in a place called Thekidi Spice Village. We wanted to hire women from the locality. The local convent there had a lot of these girls who were going to these places, just preparing to get married after they finished a basic education. And suddenly we gave them the opportunity to join the workforce. Apprehensive at first, dad, brother, whoever needs to give permission. Once they came in, the salary went back to the dad, brother, whoever else. And then we recognized and we said, we need to put a stop to this. We started bank accounts for the women, making sure the money goes to them. And again, when I go back to the cultural context, as a company, there's only that much you can do, but dowry system still exists. And then these girls said, I'm going to take care of my things, and this money is good for me. So we've come a long way from that. These women are confident. We still have girls coming in from the convent. That means no hotel education. They are from the villages, broken English. They've come in, and we've had a beautiful story of somebody who came in as a housekeeper. She went up the ranks. She moved on. Today, she's an entrepreneur in Cochin, a management contract for running our Ayurveda hotel spa. So we take great pride in that kind of a story. So that's why India is so diverse and the contexts are different. In our context, of course, there is bias. The cultural bias we have to constantly deal with. From an ownership level also, we are trying to understand how yes, the challenges of running the business then, there is a need to accommodate the needs of women. We need to make sure that the workforce itself, I mean, I think for the longest, we're trying to, like you said, we're fitting into the man's way of operating in the workforce. And then now we need to also look at how we can engage women and keep the talent with us and not make it difficult for them so that they have to leave due to whatever social, cultural, homework balance. So that's one context. Now, for me personally, I am third generation, first girl in the family who's joined the company. Again, it's a cultural context, not that it's the unsaid. I mean, my dad's generation, the girls didn't join. My granddad started it, and I'm till now the only girl. Maybe the others don't like to be in hospitality. I didn't even study hospitality, but it's pure passion. I grew up with the brand and its philosophy, and that's just it. And in that context, my though I grew up in Cochin, my education was on a world front and I never experienced a bias in education. I was fighting it out with every boy. And suddenly when you come in the culture context, which is everybody else saying, oh, like we were talking about families or extended families, already saying, oh, you're there to kill time, or, you know, what's going on? And then suddenly you're there for too long. And they're like, now we need to take you seriously. So yeah, that's my story. And I think it's also, you know, as much as there's bias, I love the fact that a different rural, small town India, women are really coming up and we are in some way.
You guys are doing an amazing job. I mean, that was a brilliant story because you're not just doing anything from a professional standpoint, you're also doing a holistic growth. So that's brilliant. That's off to you guys. That's super. And that gets me to my superstar. So the first time I met Sonica was at the HAI conference very recently, just before I broke my arm. And here walks in this lady. I was standing and talking to Puneet, and he walks in this lady. And the first thing that she starts blabbering about how she's just had a baby and blah, 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 blah. And I'm looking at her and I'm like, okay, darling, you're looking really hot, man. Like, okay, when did this baby pop up? Oh, some 7 months back or something. So I was like, wow, super. So I'm going to come to you, Sonica, and I'm going to ask you something which is called this motherhood penalty, as what I say, because there are these assumptions that are made that, you know, if you're going to hire women, women are going to get married, they're going to have baby, they're going to take a sabbatical, sabbatical is going to be an extended sabbatical, and so on and so forth. And I'm not just talking about this industry. A friend of mine happens to be a partner at a very senior consulting firm. And she keeps saying this to me that, oh, I have to do Project Baby, but I have to tie it with my promotion, with my work, and with my whatever. And I'm like, why? She's like, oh, because the minute I have a baby, then they're going to push me back and they're going to have a fight and they're going to do that. So, Sonica, did you ever have something called as a motherhood penalty?
Well, I thought I was your fan, Anshu. And I still am.
Mutual admiration will work. That'll
Mutual
work.
admiration. You know, Anshu, I think let me just put the perspective a little, take it back a couple of years. You know, I was born as a second, as a second generation entrepreneur, and I got married when I was 19 years old. So what I'm trying to tell is that I've been trying, and as a personality, love to break biases. So I got married when I was in second year of college. Okay, spoiled kid of a father up to, you know, she's married, and that's it. Well, I topped my college that year. I topped third year. I was a DU topper, and people were a bit surprised. And I love taking these challenges because I know there is that inherent bias which is existing in people's mind. And I personally believe that it's all about your performance. And sometimes creating ecosystem as well. So on a personal front, performance and being determined on the fact that I need to be focused on performance and take the biases out of my mental framework, because otherwise it puts me in a box structure. Then they were like, okay, what next? I went to do MBA. I topped that as well. I joined work. And there are people who were a part of my early professional experience. I was considered as one of those, you know, kids who would probably, you know, whiling away time, 6 months, or uske baad shaadi ho jayegi, to phir she's not going to be, you know, there anymore. But believe you me, people were far more intelligent than what I thought. They broke the biases much before than I thought they would. Within just a couple of months, they knew exactly where I was coming in from and what it meant to me.
Sonica, it's called their survival instinct.
So I think biases is a term which exists in various layers of society. It could be woman-oriented bias. It could be, you know, it could be the way you dress, as you said. There are biases in terms of from where you belong. So you have an inherent trait. So all of us are facing biases, be it a man or a woman, at various levels. And with those particular, biases come certain stereotypes, and we all are breaking it. And I wouldn't really put the benefit at that we are probably, 5 very strong women who've broken biases. Each man in the room has also broken bias in their own way. And I actually, applaud them for that. So at the end of the day, we have to be very, very focused on our own particular attributes, our performance, and our own instincts. And that's what calls it the day. Even if we were to talk about owner-oriented organizations, the days are gone that, I'm born into an entrepreneur family and, I will run the business. I have to prove my mettle. My job is not secured. I mean, there are families who have structured the organization such that the ownership is completely delineated from the management. And as an entrepreneur, I have to prove my mettle. Otherwise, I don't exist in this world at all. So I think women probably have to put in that little extra effort to prove themselves, slightly more than little. And I've also
I'm not too sure if it is just a little, but let's go with it.
Even I have put in that extra bit. But each one of us go through biases. So I think just having a women's oriented panel is quite unjust on a lot of men out there. So I think next time we should have a men in leadership panel as well. And they should also talk about their biases.
Yeah, which is actually true. We should actually be doing these panels, which is a hybrid panel. There should be both men and women
Yes,
on the panel.
absolutely.
It shouldn't just be a woman-oriented panel. But I'm going to take your point where you said about...
I forgot to answer your question on the baby front. So yeah, I mean, the first question I used to be asked was, okay, so are you still going to work? And I used to find that question so weird. So I think within even 1 month of having a baby, I was on the Zoom calls and doing work. I think these biases have never bothered me. And I kind of laugh it out. It really doesn't bother my mind or my mind space or my intellect level at all.
Yeah, your child will thank you for that. Will come in naturally into the business. But you made a point about that we have to work a little extra, and I have faced this. I am making an assumption here that a lot of ladies would have faced it. It's not just us. It's a globally accepted fact. Women try too hard sometimes to prove a point or to be there because they just need to do that, and that makes them hypervigilant. It makes them just being cautious about everything. It's like the fear, even when things are going well for you, you just think that, oh my God, when is the other shoe going to drop? So you're going to be really careful about what you're doing. I am not too sure, and I've seen this with my colleagues, I'm not too sure whether they overthink a decision, so I can understand some major decisions, but I've seen it enough number of times that the guy would turn around and take a decision, and I would have overthought that damn same thing that I would know that I have to do, but I would overthink it. Ritika, have you ever seen that with yourself, that you actually put in a lot more effort and a lot more time in trying to do the same thing that your peers, your male colleagues, just do it naturally? And maybe your answer is right. Everything is there, but it's just that you've tried too hard.
I think it depends on the context. And yeah, I'm sure there are times in my life when I've probably gone back and done too much of overthinking on certain things, but I find that so do men do that. Actually, I think, in fact, I tell some of my male colleagues that, I think the stereotypes in our own minds sometimes of what we think of each other as men and women. And I do agree with what Sonica said, that it's also an applaud to all the men in the room, because biases are there in everything. And you could think, you could overthink. You could also go back and make a bit of a mountain out of a molehill in your own head. But I think, as you go along in your life, you find your own feet. You realize what makes it okay for you. And there are times when you know that, okay, this is not something that I'm going to be able to do, or, let it be, this is going to be like that. And I think just take it with a pinch of salt, and I think with a great sense of humor as well. Because I think if you can't laugh at yourself, then you've probably lost the battle.
Yeah, true.
So
that.
I think for me, yes, there are times when you maybe go back and do many things a little bit too much. You must go back and, dot it out till the last moment. And then there are many things you just wing it and say, like we were discussing earlier today, that women also wing it through many things in our life. We can just kind of do it a lot. You can also multitask a lot, which a lot of neurologists tell you is not really good for you. You can also take a lot of calls at the same time. You can do many things. So I think it just depends on who you are as a person. And for me, yes, I'm sure there are times when I've probably done that. Exactly what you said.
There's another myth to it that women don't understand numbers too well, which is really funny coming in our country because most of the bankers are women, or some of the senior ones are women. But I've been personally told this, that, oh, did you negotiate this yourself? Because negotiating is hard and it's numbers, and do you guys do it? Sonica, the the same event that we're talking about. This lady sat there in this panel, all serious looking guys. She was this bright color sitting over there, super confident, only talking numbers. Have you ever felt that that you were out of the room, out of the context, you're out of place in that forum, or it just comes naturally to you?
I think
There, the owner will
breaking
speak now.
stereotypes comes pretty naturally to me. I know that there is a stereotype. People think that, okay, if it's a woman, probably she's better at designing, you know, she's better at probably, housekeeping, HR. These are stereotypes. Pardon me for saying it, and I think they're very profound areas as well. But for me, when I sit in a room, I'm pretty much used to of having 10, 12 men who are talking hard numbers, and I try and make sense to them, which is fine. I'm absolutely okay that they have a stereotype, because I know I'll be able to get out of it in matter of sometimes seconds, sometimes minutes, and sometimes in a few months.
You were
And yes,
thoroughly amused on that panel. You were enjoying that panel.
And yes, I have faced a lot of bias when I say that, I take care of the corporate finance and the taxation and the legal. It doesn't sink in well to them. But I think within a meeting, I think I kind of make myself pretty. And plus, you just can't be saying you're an owner sitting on that panel and, as a heading the table. But you need to prove that you have had that experience to be able to handle it. I haven't started handling it from day one of joining the company. I've also learned it being mentored. I've also had education backgrounds to actually support me in that. So it's not just me, owner, stepping in. And because I'm an owner's daughter, so as a girl, I've got the privilege of taking up that responsibility. I think I've also, and a lot of times, all of us are not good at everything. And I very humbly accept whenever in a position, I feel there is a topic or a subject, I don't have much knowledge. It could be as simple as maybe some hotel operation areas. I take a step back, but not because I'm a woman, I have to prove myself correct all the time. I don't take that pressure on my head. I need to, as a leader of the organization, a lot of times understand that the team is better than me.
Well said.
Right.
Very
so
well said.
It doesn't mean because I'm a woman, I need to prove everybody is lesser than me. So that stereotype also needs to get out of my mind. And I keep that pretty much balanced in my mind. Yeah.
Super, super. Anjali, what do you think should be some learning for women at mid-levels in the industry? Mridula shared some beautiful story of how they're working it out and how they're getting people from villages and getting women to get encouraged to work and doing this holistic growth. I think that's outstanding. As professionals, what do you think should be done for, or what could be bias that they would be feeling, and what do you think we should be doing to mitigate it?
So I think just going back to what you said earlier, sometimes we as women are very hard upon ourselves, wanting to prove something and push yourself much harder. If you just accept who you are and play on your own strengths and what you want to do and achieve in life, I think just being true and honest to yourself is more important than doing that. Somebody said to me, again, many years ago, learn to accept some dust in your life. It's okay if you may not succeed in everything that you do, but it's okay to fail. It's okay to get up and start running again. I think that's what at the mid-level. I mean, I was reading this book which said, "Is this a glass ceiling or a sticky floor?" And it made me think that. Probably it's just something that exists in our minds. We are sometimes victims of cobwebs that exist in our own minds. So be who you are, chase your dreams with a passion. I think to what Sonica just said, that all of us have biases, so we don't go with the preconceived notion that somebody is biased against me. I think that is something that we also need to shed. And be open about it. So follow your passion, follow your dreams. I just wanted to highlight something that one of our general managers did very recently, and he's here, Madhav. He did a campaign called Chefs at the Leela, where he brought in, and chefs with an SHEFS. He brought in 4 international Indian chefs who have made a place for themselves globally. And he brought them into the hotel, yes, to curate a beautiful evening for guests. But I think one of the most beautiful things that he did, and which really touched me personally, was that he flew in lady chefs from all of our other hotels and from the colleges locally. He brought in these students who were aspiring chefs and did a masterclass with these four
That's
chefs.
great exposure.
To actually talk to them and inspire them and share real life experiences of what are some of the challenges that they faced in their lives. And I think it's such a beautiful, when you see the impact of something like this, you know, what it meant to the four chefs who were able to impart their learnings to these young children. I would call them children because for me, they're still children. And they're starting off their careers in the hospitality industry. But I think that is what we need to do more of. Share our experiences, give them the confidence that it's okay to be who you are. It's okay to believe in your dreams, to believe in the power of who you are and work towards realizing it.
Yeah, I think that's the intrinsic thing that we should get. And also possibly as companies, we should just codify performance systems, which should be just quantified. And so it should be less qualitative, more quantified, just codified. So it doesn't leave really room for ambiguity over there. Before I open it up for everyone, if anyone has any questions, if they have any views, please just raise your hand so that we could hear it from you as well. And Mridula, there is this whole thing that we have on diversity and inclusion, and you know that's something that everybody's doing. There are lots of policies that have come in. Do you have something like that in your company?
It's interesting that you asked that. I would say diversity and inclusion is pretty much part of our core values. So the company itself, in the way we formulated it in responsible tourism, sustainable practices, people became a big part of our story, and people from the local villages. And then there itself, we said inclusion, you could be higher up in, whether it's caste, whether it is women, gender, age. In fact, age is a great story. We have that in Coconut Lagoon in the backwaters, we have an old lady who comes in from the village, and you have to see that these are women who can row these boats on their own. And she, old, sitting at home. And then we saw an opportunity because technically the brand is a big storytelling of unique experiences. And we said, she's got a skill set. So we invited her in to join us. And she rows in every day in the evening to serve tea to our guests from her boat. And that way we have elderly also coming into, now we've sort of broken every stereotype.
That means I'll have a job with you.
Yeah. I mean, we're just looking at what is it that they can bring to the table. We have somebody called Francis who's in Spice Village. I really don't even know how old he is. He's, ever since I was a child, I've seen him there. So, and he came from the British run plantations, and he worked as a club manager, not a manager, maybe at a much junior level. But today he's an institution in our organization. People connect with him. People go back to New York and they're writing to the manager, wanting to connect with Francis, ask him about his whereabouts. So from a diversity and inclusion, it's not something that we've plugged in a new policy. It's always been part of our DNA in the way we formulated it. So gender, I have to admit, sure, our numbers are lesser for sure. The women population are less, but it's never that we don't want. Yes, there are struggles of can they do long hours and what are the other challenges. But from an organization's perspective, sure, we want women. We want more women.
And you've created an ecosystem that works for them. That's really great.
Like I said in the earlier statement, the cultural context also has its limitations. So for them to grow, they really have to do a lot of shifts in their home front, which not everyone is able to break that barrier. There are success stories, but there are a whole lot of them who are not able to break that as well. But there are many who've just come up the whole ranks through the system. fewer women, but there are women also. So that way, inclusions and diversity, I would think it's a lot of different aspects that we're covering. We're looking at the community and whoever.
Yeah, I think what you're doing very well is that you're actually executing it. A lot of times it happens in many companies across the globe that diversity and inclusion is like an SOP, and like most SOPs that we hoteliers have, it comes out when there is a mistake, when there's a fault that happens, and then we go back to that SOP to say whether it's followed. Otherwise, they are SOPs and they stay in the book. So I think the actual execution of the diversity inclusion is what you've just demonstrated. Are there any views, any questions, any just experiences that anyone would like to share here? All right, I think we've covered it all then. Ritika, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, actually, I was just thinking when Mridula was talking and we were discussing this earlier, even taking back to the first question that you asked me, I think I have personally been very fortunate to work with the Tata Group and with the Indian Hotels Company, which is part of that, because both these organizations are more than a century old. To my mind, diversity is no better exemplified than in these two companies, in these two organizations, because you could not go back from being a steel maker to a car maker to hoteliering to salt to chemicals. So I think diverse thoughts are very important. And because you mentioned about codifying, I think it is extremely important. It's a journey. I think all of us agree that we are very fortunate to be here and to share our experiences. And of course, younger women coming in the workforce have to obviously go back. And like we discussed, it's the first 2 or 3 years when you would either figure out what you want to do. And it could be in any industry, not only in the hospitality industry. So I think it is very important for organizations to have enshrined behaviors and cultures that actually encourage that, to encourage, like, I would say, differentiated thoughts, accept whatever is being said around you, and you can still agree to disagree. That's a very important aspect. And in that sense, I'm sure many of you have seen She's the Taj campaign many years ago when you were there. And earlier this year, the leadership again, we went back and we unveiled something called She Remains the Taj. And many people asked us, is it just the same campaign? But it is not only about a campaign. It's actually the thought about, making sure that as you look ahead for the here and now, for the future, because the world has changed around us. What we saw or what we were willing to go back and perhaps, like Anjali shared her story where she was willing to go back and fight it out and say, I will prove myself. In today's context of the way that the workforce is changing, millennials are coming to the fore. They obviously go back. They are much more keener than perhaps we were when we were growing up. They want to see that you're walking the talk. And therefore, She Remains a Taj is nothing but a holistic framework, in a sense, codifying it for perhaps the world to see, something that we already know. And I just wanted to share with you that as part of that, one of the targets that we've set ourselves as an organization is to have 25% of our workforce by 2025 represented by women. Wow. We're already at about 18%, 17 to 18%, which is also a growth in the last 2 years. But I think that's something which is, and it can't happen if you don't go back and take action at every step for that. So yes, it has to be codified in many different ways. HR, of course, is not the only department that has to do it. All of us have to do it. And I'm sure that as we go along, hospitality is such a fun business to be in. We'll probably see a lot more women also joining the fore.
Ladies and gentlemen, She's the Taj. Thank you very much, Ritika, Anjali, Sonica, Mridula, for your candor. It was amazing. You've been very outright over there and shared your personal experiences. So thank you very much. And I hope it was insightful for everybody. Thank you for your attention.